Greetings, you are listening to Guiding Stars Evolutionary Astrology Radio. This is your host, Kristin Fontana. Today I'm here with SΥmÖn Vorster from Sweden, and we are in the middle of a series discussing Saturn through the houses and signs. And today we are here to discuss Saturn in Cancer, or Saturn in the fourth house. So I'd like to welcome SΥmÖn back to Guiding Stars. Welcome back.
Hi, Kristin. Thanks very much. Always glad to share the space with you.
Absolutely, me too as well. And we have already looked at Saturn in Aries, or the first house, Saturn in Taurus, or the second house, Saturn in Gemini, or the third house. And those shows are available via EA Zoom on YouTube. So check it out if you missed those. And we're going to continue forward, going all the way around the zodiac until we've completed this cycle and circle. And SΥmÖn and I, as I've shared in other shows, thought it would just be timely and ideal to discuss Saturn in this context because of the fact that it is currently in its sign of Capricorn, sign that it rules. There's just so much emphasis.
Yeah, that's completely true.
So we don't feel too weighed down by the gravity that it can carry in our lives, and so we can work with it and really work on our lessons surrounding Saturn. Saturn in Cancer, the fourth house, in my opinion, is probably one of the toughest places for it. And so by knowing that, then, and learning how to work with the energy, we're hoping that it can help you evolve within it. So before we get started, though, SΥmÖn, you have something you wanted to announce? You've got something to offer the listeners today.
Yes. So I just recently created a Chiron workshop. It's a 4-part video series, and it essentially breaks down the experience and the understanding of Chiron in a way that not only helps you navigate the experience of dealing with Chiron, but it also gives you an opportunity to sort of use these tools that I've developed from my own experience of working with my Chiron, so that when you do go on your mission, you have these tools available for you to, like, signposts almost. And that's actually available on my website, which I'll share at the end of this this video. But if you want to write it down now, it is www.raising and then vibrations.com. And if you would like to know more about what that actual course entails, there is a free 2-hour lecture on my YouTube channel, which again, you can just type in Raising Vibrations and my name, and you'll see that there's a 2-hour lecture where I explore Chiron and sort of, suggest to how we can actually use that symbol as a transformational portal in our lives. And this video teaching, these 4 videos, are supportive material along our personal Chiron story. So I'm really excited about that. I had a lot of fun learning about that. It's definitely one of the definitely one of the most passionate aspects of learning astrology that I've definitely delved into over the last 6 months. So interesting. So yeah, just wanted to share that with everybody. Yeah, it is.
Topic right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like, just to have a symbol that is specific to the wound.
Yes.
Specific, just dials right into the center of it. It's like that. It's like a light shining. Come over this way and start here.
That's right. Eh?
Maybe not start here. It's just we start obviously with Pluto and the nodal axis, but within Pluto, within our soul, we carry the wounds of the past. And so it's just every angle we can come into the chart, and anything that we can glean from our journey, is beneficial always. So,
yeah. And just
Saturn, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and to touch on that, one of the major reasons as to why I created it was the major reason was that I noticed that when I've explored EA, to me, evolutionary astrology and the nature of understanding the soul is a little bit, it's not a little bit, it's vastly different from just the normal kind of textbooks astrology, okay? And I think that when we begin to learn to work with the soul, there is a different dimension of reality that must be understood, like a deeper spiritual understanding, because it really, really is deep. And if you don't have those tools to begin navigating soul experiences, it can be very confusing, and it can be very uncomfortable, and it can be very disheartening. You know, there's a lot of experiences that I've not only witnessed with inside of myself, but also just in other people that I've had readings with, where I've seen that there is a Pluto story coming up for them, or there's a Uranian story that's coming up for them, and the way to psychologically relate to those experiences, I feel, is something that's really needed during this time. And the attitude that I took to Chiron was not just the asteroid, but it was actually looking at how to synthesize Saturn and Uranus together, and then how that actually points to Pluto. And that was really the piece that I brought into it. It was how to actually access Pluto through Saturn and Uranus's configuration, you know, to really broaden the understanding of soul lives, and to broaden the understanding that, and we'll talk about this in today. In fact, I've actually got a slide from that course in today's conversation, where Saturn in classically can just be seen as this very oppressive dynamic, which in the mythology of Chiron, you can actually see it very clearly. But if you actually work with your Saturn in a healthy way, it's the bedrock of what actually allows your Uranian imprints to be nurtured into and to be sown into. And if you don't really have a firm grasp of that, it's just random information in your head, because you actually have to live the experience to psychologically transform your psyche. So to me, it was heavily influenced by the understanding of what E8 brought me. And that's what this material is really about. It's a practical guide to working with the soul in a way that actually affects change, in a way that's healthy and integrative, versus something that's more, you know, kind of not necessarily negative, but experiences that can be traumatizing, you know.
Absolutely. You know, this reminds me of a lot of work that I've done looking at the root chakra.
Mhm.
Of course, Pluto is at the center of the root chakra, hence the name root. It's the root of who we are. It's where the soul lives.
Right.
And then we've got the Uranian layer around that, which essentially is the soul's vibration.
Yep.
And what it is, the soul emits a signal that we emit to the world that says who we are. And then the Saturnian casing around that. There's 3 layers at the root that protects us. It's our defense mechanism. So of course, by chipping away at what we've repressed and resisted, and getting into that Uranian element that reflects who we are, our own individuality, and going deeper to access the essence of who we are, which is the soul. Of course, you will find the wounds there as well. That's why the Saturnian layer can be so thick for many, if they've really felt like, you know, they've been through the ringer in other lifetimes perhaps, and maybe there's been a lot of betrayals or abandonment, and so they're going to do everything that they can to protect their center.
Right.
And so yes, the Chiron, the wounds will sit there. I mean, I think about even and I realize this is on Saturn. I have Saturn and Chiron both in Pisces, and they both, Pluto and Uranus, oppose the Saturn and the Chiron, which in essence is just an example of how the innocence of my soul and how I was created by God being completely destroyed by the patriarchy, which is most people's story, really.
Yes.
And it's in my 9th house, so it's about my nature, how God designed me, and in patriarchal times it just never worked, because of, you know, the male dominance that existed and what they wanted to do with a natural woman, in essence, a wild woman. So anyway, all of that is repressed, and so the only way that in terms of evolutionary astrology or your evolutionary journey, the only way to deal with the Pluto polarity in this context, in my context, is to deal with the wound first. Because that Chiron is literally sitting exactly on my Pluto polarity. So that has to be moved away or dealt with in order for evolution to occur. It's like just standing on the threshold there. You want in, then deal with this. You want to evolve, then deal with this.
I love what you shared. That was just exactly what it is.
All right. Well, that sounds awesome, SΥmõn. Thank you so much for bringing that into the show and letting people know about it. And we're going to continue on here and looking at Saturn in Cancer, the fourth house. So what we like to do is discuss, as we kind of tapped into a little bit already, is the archetype of Saturn, just on its own and what it symbolizes in the chart. And gosh, the more I really work with Saturn and understand its influence, and the most important thing I can offer, as I've shared in other shows, is just that wherever your Saturn is, by house and sign, will condition everything else in your chart. And so it's not just about a planet sitting there in a house and a sign. If you have Saturn in Cancer, that energy and that element is going to wrap Cancer around every other planet. It's the wrapping, it's the house, essentially the walls, the foundation, the roof in Cancer of all the rest of your planets. So if you've got Mars in Pisces, yet you've got Saturn in Cancer, that Saturn's going to wrap that Mars in Pisces with the energy of Cancer. So it just changed the way I looked at charts when I really got into this many years ago. And it I made everything make sense, even in my own chart and the charts of those that I know and love. And so it's an important way. It's really essential to look at the chart, understanding the position of this archetype or this Saturn placement. So there's more we can share. I'll let you take it from here, and I'll step in on occasion. Just wanted to remind you of that.
Yeah, right. Well, I think it's important to always hold the structure of what Saturn represents. Just a reminder all the time that consistency, a Saturn theme, and it's very important. I think that anybody that's practicing astrology, that's listening to the show, and you want to go and experiment with what Kristin's sharing about Saturn being the conditioning field for other ways in which the planets manifest themselves in the chart, I think you'll gain a lot of insight into how those planets have been shaped by the conditioning field of the child, because we've all been children at some point. We were all under a specific sort of boundary of protection that our parents would have held in place for us. Whether that was supportive or not to our soul's purpose is another different story, but it was essentially the boundaries. And that's a very Saturn in Cancer thing to actually speak about, the nature of what is the conditioning field in the home. What were the boundaries that were established in the home? What were the rules? What were the regulations? And how were you as a person very sensitive to those established boundaries that were put in place in the home? When we look at Saturn in the fourth or in Cancer, there are two ways that I want to approach this, or speak about it. The first one being that when we look at Saturn from an archetypal perspective in a relationship to Cancer and the intention of why a soul would choose that, it's very clear, in my view at least, that when you explore the rest of the chart, there's probably going to be a part of the soul's need to reorientate or redefine their self-image in this lifetime. And part of the growing up or maturation process that Cancer in the fourth house, Saturn in the fourth house, or Saturn Cancer will represent is how are you re-establishing your own boundaries and how are those boundaries being reestablished around a new sense of self. So it could show up as you might potentially with, Uranus in your charts being aspected, or Venus in Aquarius, be needing to reject the family values and the certain rules and regulations that are established in the home as a way to objectify what you consider to be valuable, or the essential values that are important in a home structure. What do you feel are the correct ways to run routines within a home? And of course, most of this will already probably be experienced when you're older, but you will feel as a young child, from what I've observed in people, a difference in how you engage with the established structure within the home. And the key word being home in this case, because when you drill deeper into the Cancer archetype, Jeffrey used to talk about it and teach it as the ego structure. And I've, there are a lot of people that have their own ideas about this, but I really do truly get what he's talking about here, because he's pointing to a security need that we establish in each moment. And when we are essentially giving energy to that security need in each moment over a period of time, so within an hour, within 5 hours, within 6 hours, and within a week, after a period of time, we have these string of emotional imprintings or security needs that are established that over, like I said, over a long period of time becomes a formation of self, a formation of ego identity. That's one of the ways that he described that. And that is a very interesting piece, because like I said, when you drill down deeper, encoded within your value structure within the ego structure is your values, your sense of survival. So if you look at the natural sextile between Cancer and Taurus in the natural zodiac, you'll see that we have survival needs, and then we have emotional needs, right, with Cancer. But then we also have this interplay between that when we eat or digest food, or when we rest, or when we have our physical needs met, Saturn, for the second house, they're generally within the comfort of our own home, or in the comfort of our environment that is safe. Okay, we feel a place of rest and digest, so being the home. So Saturn in the fourth house can speak to where the established structure, karmically, is put in place and held, and this can be a pre-existing structure that needs to be re-examined, or like I said, it doesn't have to be re-examined. This is only if the point in the chart speaks to a soul that's here to re-establish an entirely new sense of self. And so those are things that show up with Saturn in the fourth house, in my opinion. The other side of it is that this can be somebody that has a need in this lifetime to establish a connection to the home, and that there can be a series of lifetimes in which there has been a disturbance within the family structure, or within the home structure, within the nuclear structure, and so this person could actually feel an absence of belonging, and that Saturn could represent the repression or the division of connection between earth, mother, home, bond, and one's own sense of rootedness, belongingness. I mean, this is a profound word to really think about and feel into when you have Saturn in the fourth house, belonging. And you'll be incredibly surprised at the amount of people with Saturn in the fourth house that I've come across where that thread is actually very prevalent in their life, that sense of belonging,
So that they don't have a sense of belonging.
Yeah, that's right. And it can be because of the Saturn boundary that was put in place. And when I say put in place, I mean was established through a conditioning field from the society. And this is the type of soul that, with Uranus, there can be a subtle trauma mind stream issue there, where there's an actual fragmentation. But with Saturn in the fourth house here, this can actually be where societal laws or governance have separated families because of a specific rule that's put in place that doesn't honor natural law, as an example. And so there's a kind of separation, there's a division. It can be a division in the home between the two authorities, between mother and father, as an example. It can be a rift between yourself and your mother. Think about the main word with Saturn in the fourth as a rift, as a division. And so in that place, there's always a duality that's existing within the emotional dynamics of somebody for themselves and how they relate to the values of the home or the traditions of the home, the routines in the home.
Wow. I just thought of somebody while you were talking who has this symbol, somebody well known, and I'll just share it later, that just as you were talking and describing that, it's amazing when you're talking about Saturn and Cancer, you just immediately feel through this reality, and then immediately, all of a sudden I'm remembering different people with that. It's a feeling, it's so palpable. It's a feeling we've all experienced when transiting Saturn has entered our fourth house. We all know it. We don't have to have the signature to know how it feels. 2.5 years at a time, it will do that. And every about 30 years, we will experience it. It's hard, and it is an energy that reminds me of a song called Out Here on My Own. Gosh, I think it was a song from the movie Fame or something way back when. Anyway, Out Here on My Own, great song. And it does create a feeling as if, you've got to grow up fast.
Yes.
Take responsibility for your life early on, maybe like you said, a rift between the parents, or maybe only one parent. Maybe your mother is playing mother and father, your father's playing mother and father, where having to shoulder both sides, and you're having to step in and play a more grown-up role. And so what happens oftentimes with Saturn in the fourth, or Saturn in Cancer, is there can be an emotional arrestment, because the natural process of experiencing the emotions as a child, or moving through a natural process of maturation, is, if you're forced to grow up fast, then you can even be skipping steps in places where you're, all those waters, those emotional waters, aren't allowed to travel at a normal rate or pace, because you're being forced through something more quickly. And again, remember that all souls will choose this signature for a reason, and in the past they might have become too dependent on parents, or leaned too heavily on them. I know Yogananda teaches that God takes loved ones from our lives so we don't stop seeking God, and so we don't get confused and think that the happiness that we're experiencing comes from another. So the search must continue until we come to know for ourselves that this unconditional love can only be found within. And so the Saturn in Cancer teaches you, or in the fourth, that this is where it all starts, that nothing outside of you can complete you or can fill that inner void, that hunger inside of you. You must turn in and go through another door. And that door essentially is your soul, and through extension, what created you, through the water trine, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. And so it is, Hard Knock Saturn is called Hard Knock Saturn for a reason. And if someone has this symbol in their chart, and you're listening, for yourself that never, for your entire life, there will be lessons surrounding leaning on yourself for your own sense of security, learning how to cultivate your own feeling of wholeness and holiness within yourself, learning what you need and how to nurture yourself, and oftentimes too, even attracting people into your life, whether it's a partner, etc., that ultimately do not give you what you need emotionally. And that happens because, in part, that Saturnian casing that I was referring to around the root chakra, the Saturn in Cancer, typically it's pretty thick, because you've been protecting yourself for some reason. And so you are learning how to unwrap that layer to become more vulnerable in the world. And because you are learning that it is in that vulnerability, as that layer, outer casing, starts to thin down, where your ultimate strength sits and exists. As you emerge, it's like, emerging, what is it, like the Kali archetype, really emerging from the ashes of old. And so you're learning, while it's a scary thing and can be very fearful at times, to be vulnerable because of what might have happened in another life leading into this life, but you are learning that your deepest strength lies there in the very center of what scares you the most. Knowing that you can do it on your own, handle it on your own, shoulder it on your own, and there is nothing more empowering than knowing that you don't need somebody to make it at the end of the day, or to survive, or to feel happy, or at peace, or in balance. You just need yourself. And when you can do it on your own, and that vibration that you send out to others becomes incredibly appealing to other people. Wow, that soul knows who it is.
Awesome. Amazing, amazing, amazing. I actually have a, like I said, I've got a slide that I used in the Chiron workshop that speaks to the armoring, and we'll move on to that a bit later. But it was a really profound description for somebody that is living with Saturn in the fourth, because just this point of growing up in the home faster than what maybe you wanted to do. So it's definitely something to look at with Saturn in the fourth house, at processing unresolved grief. Because again, whatever your story is, there's going to be an aspect of your emotional fluidity. The flow of the emotional Cancer archetype is going to have some blocks to it, and that will definitely show up within the actual body itself, I think, because again, the body has so much water as its primary sort of makeup, that when Saturn shows up in our charts, and especially in the water signs, there's going to be an element of repressed or suppressed emotional dynamics, complexes. I actually remember very, very clearly that when Saturn transited my fourth house, because whenever Saturn transits my fourth house, it's going to be opposing my natal Saturn. So it's always fun to deal with Saturn transit the fourth house. And I remember distinctly that when Saturn transited my fourth house, it was a complete and utter exact description of two parents, and in this case, because Saturn natally is in Scorpio for me, it was a power play, between the two parents within the home dynamic, and there was an actual kind of shifting of what values were defined in the home. And now that when I reflect back on that time, after you pointing this out, when you had said when Saturn transits your fourth, you'll feel it, I was like, hold on, that happened to me, and that will happen to me again. And so it's true. It definitely, that redefinition, the carving out, the growing up, taking responsibility, it was so apparent and clear at the time. And I do a lot, to a certain degree, look back at my childhood and think to myself that there were a lot of moments where I felt that I had to shoulder a lot more responsibility than what I needed to at the time. And so, I'm working through that grief for myself. So Saturn in the fourth house can definitely speak to that. I think it's important with Saturn in the fourth to also do a lot of work around the mother archetype, and what she represents to you, how you internalized her, what her role was like in the home, how you mimic that role as a mother if you are one, and how that kind of plays out psychologically in the choices that you make. And very, very, very important, I think, to highlight the healing journey that accompanies Saturn in the fourth house as it relates to Pluto, in the deeper intention around, how what it means to get in touch with the more sensitive part of your nature as a product or a way of interrelating with other people. You know, I think the fourth house itself holds a lot of ancestral karma in it. I think that when you definitely do any work, especially with Uranus transiting the fourth and becomes very experiential, Uranus definitely wants to bring stuff to the surface that needs to be resolved from Pluto. But when you're dealing with Saturn, I think that the proximity of that emotional work is a lot closer and a lot more physical than it would be, say, if Uranus was transiting the fourth or Uranus was in the fourth house, just because of the nature of the two symbols. So, but they still, to me, point to a very core need to get in touch with one's feelings and emotions as a product of healing in this lifetime. And you know, whatever materializes out of that is something that can always be given to others as medicine. It can be just deep like feminine teachings, you know, teachings of motherhood and what that really symbolizes, and the types of sort of ego surrendering that you have to go through as a mother. I think when you're raising children, especially in the first 2-3 years of, so yeah.
All right. That was really important what you brought up about the mother. And one of the things that I was thinking about when you were discussing this earlier is Jungian analyst and author Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves. For her home was in nature.
Wow.
Mother Nature was her mother. I mean, she was born to Mexican parents and adopted by immigrants from Hungary in like rural Indiana. If that's not like Saturn retrograde in Cancer in the 11th, it's she really was on her own. And so even in her book, she talks a lot about her time in nature, you know, and that's where she felt at home. And so, you know, as you were sharing that, so not only does she have Saturn in Cancer, it's retrograde, you know, and it's in the 11th house. So, you know, 11th house can be adoption and just, you know, being separated from your mother at birth in this case. And so, and as Yoganand was teaching, as I mentioned, it's really learning to access the mother within, or knowing how to nurture ourselves, but also connecting with Mother Nature or the Heavenly Mother, right? This eternal current, this energy that is not essentially in a human body, right? It is something universal. It's all about getting into the river, as I so often refer to as the river is finding its way back to the sea representing God or the source of all things. That river will follow the path of least resistance. Our emotions will follow that path. And Clarissa Pinkola Estes says in her book, it's the chapter Battle Wounds or Battle Scars, Battle Wounds, I think, is one of my favorite chapters in there. And she talks about tears lifting your boat off the rocks and taking you downriver to a better place. You think about your boat hitting the rocks when you've been through something painful, emotionally painful, and you're just stuck in that emotion and weighed down by it, grief-stricken by something. And, you know, the tears allow everything beneath you, within you, to lift up. It creates an energy or a movement, a current that, yes, can carry your life, your soul downriver to a better place. I mean, we are always in a state of becoming. The only thing, when we are not static beings, and the only constant is change. And when we remember that, how we feel today is not necessarily going to be how we're going to feel tomorrow. Or even how we feel in this moment can shift in the next moment. But it does require us to be in the water, in with it. And in order to evolve and to connect more deeply to the energy that can feed us and filter in that unconditional love. The eternal well. The eternal well is Pisces, and Cancer is part of that current. And I feel that if people can remember who have this archetype, because there's so much water in their chart, it's just got a lid on it sometimes. You know, it's, you're literally standing at the door of, or you're standing at the edge of the well. It's just about getting into it, having the courage to dip into it, because there's so much abundance there. And the well never runs dry, ever.
No, that's right. And actually, there's a chart that we've got over here, or that I brought to today's conversation as well, where you can clearly see the water energy, just so apparent. It's just to kind of highlight what you were talking about there, a lot. I wanted to share this imagery with everybody that's listening and watching, and you've mentioned it actually quite a few times, to be honest, in today's conversation. And you were speaking about Saturn being this outer realm around the Uranus realm,
wow.
and then you got Pluto, so the root chakra. And I you know, Saturn will reveal to us a duality where we first have to break. The first thing that you need to do with Saturn, wherever it sits in the chart, is you have to confront the limitations of your own conditioning that was established and erected when you were born. The values, the rules, the traditions, the ideologies that were taken on board, that your parents handed down to you, and then you get to your Saturn return and you kind of have to start breaking away a lot of the barriers that you put in place that really you needed to protect yourself with when you were younger. And so it's really important to see Saturn in your chart. And in Cancer, it's working specifically around the self-image. And like you said, dynamics of codependency, dynamics of emotional enmeshment, dynamics of rifts emotionally, where you're actually emotionally frozen. But what this picture reveals to me is, why we have defenses. And I love this image so much because when you look at the castle, it brings such a Saturn theme to the story of that these walls are put in place because on one level, the outer world is incredibly, like, it's hostile. When you look at this image here, it reveals this world of intensity, and that's why resilience is an essential part of a Capricorn archetype. The skin around us, we need to harden it a little bit, so that we don't get sort of completely bumped by life and then we're kind of squishy. So Saturn represents to us a part of us that wants to be protected and nurtured. And of course, Saturn in Cancer can point to a need for emotional resilience, so that you're not too squishy and kind of just like falling apart at every single challenge that life gives you. Because life can be, and it does, and it will, bring you to points in your journey that will ask you to have to toughen up. But then there's also the part with this imagery over here that represents a kind of shielding from traumatic experiences that we were unable to process. And so Saturn, it goes into the subconscious, and this is what Jeffrey Wolf Green talks about with the hand grenade going off in the Uranian realm. If there's too much repression, it just explodes. And so we are always at a threshold. You were talking about a threshold earlier. There is always a threshold with Saturn. And that threshold is literally protecting us from the material of the outside world that may be too much for us to digest or process. So we protect ourselves, we defend ourselves, we align walls with it. But here's something that's really beautiful in this process. And it says, you've read it already. When we protect ourselves, so we don't feel pain. And this is something that's really crucial with Cancer archetype and this water trinity with Pisces and Scorpio. Pain is a doorway or a gateway to transformation from a place of lack of empathy to a place of compassion and living in the heart. We have to go through experiences that will at least at some point bring us to a deeper heartful way of being. But we can protect ourselves. So that protection becomes like armor. And this is what I meant about the Saturn in the fourth house. Is like you do need to work with the relationship between the mother archetype, because, or whoever represented the nurturing conditioning in your early life, because if that was mirrored to you as a very armored person, the likelihood of you responding in that way is there a lot. And that armor can become an imprisonment to the softness of gentle behavior, of sensitivity, of being able to feel Cancer archetype. This is what you're talking about with this river that flows through us. That there can be a complete shutting off of that gentle sensitivity that is needed to be applied when, say, for instance, a child cuts themselves at the age of 3 and they don't know why they've been cut by something that they've done, but they need that caring sort of nurturing, hey, it's going to be okay, like it's a cut, it probably feels a little bit owie type of thing. I mean, I've been incarnating the kind of language you would use, but we'll get a plaster and it's going to be good, right? Would you like a favorite sort of, I don't know, ice cream or something? And it's in that behavior. You can see the Saturn Capricorn nurturing dynamic where you're kind of comforting the pain. The pain is a teacher, but we can also then nurture our bellies with something that brings us into a state of feeling warm inside, so Cancer correlating to food, because we like to eat ourselves. And sometimes you can be an emotional eater with Saturn in the fourth house, because these emotions can really become overwhelming. So this image here, there's so much to talk about, but in a sense, I love it because it's just such a great way to illustrate a kind of Saturn in the fourth house dynamic where we can shelter ourselves and protect ourselves from our own sensitivity, and that then becomes a kind of imprisonment, and you actually become hardened by it. And the irony is that some Saturn in Cancer people can be incredibly harsh and incredibly cut off and have lost their way from that sensitivity that was really there, that they couldn't really sort of process, and it became a prison. So
yeah, it's like it's it can be very controlling emotionally, because
yes,
a lot of that has to do with this fear of losing love or losing those they love, and the fear can be so deep that it intercepts the moment and it can supersede love in those moments. And so
brilliant.
people in their life are like, whoa, and the loss in other times may have generated greater tendencies toward attachment, right? So they grip harder and can desperately hold on to those for dear life, and so it can create a smothering also, which could cause other people to flee. It's just the nature of the fear of losing
Yes.
what they've loved before. And so there's this need to minimize attachment to others and attachment to outcomes with the square Libra. Attachment to outcomes for fear of losing it all once more. So it's a leaning, the need to lean on themselves. I've given this visual of before of, it's like swimming with your clothes on, and anyone who's been thrown into a pool or a body of water with their clothes on, I have older brothers, so it happened all the time to me, and my friends, we just got tossed in the pool with our clothes on. But it's pretty hard to move when you're in the water with your clothes on, and that's exactly what a Saturn and Cancer energy can be. It's like getting into that river with all this weight, and it's a lot easier if you just strip it down and get in vulnerable and naked. You're going to be able to feel what you need to. The river will feel so much better without all those clothes on. It just will. And your connection to it will feel better. And you won't drown from the emotion. You'll actually be able to move with the emotion. So, that's a very visceral analogy there. But so we should jump into a couple charts if we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see the chart on the screen at the moment, right?
Right. Okay. So this is Mindy Smith, and she is a folk singer. I love her. She's Australian, I believe. Oh no, maybe she is not. I'm thinking of somebody else. No, she is not Australian. Um, I've got another one like her on my mind. But she was adopted also at birth by a non-denominational Protestant minister and his wife, who was the choir director at the church. Boy, that sounds like my upbringing right there to a T, except for I was not adopted. But anyway, she she grew up in Long Island, New York. I was thinking of somebody else, yeah. But listen to this. So she was adopted. We see the North Node and Moon in Capricorn, the Moon in Capricorn on the North Node in the 12th house, Protestant minister. So this, consensus religious reality. She did get some musical influence through the father being the, I guess the mother was a choir director actually. But so not only was she adopted, but her mother died of cancer when Mindy was probably a teenager at some point in time. So quite a double hit, hard hit. And then this feeling of not being belonging anywhere, knowing you're adopted, and then losing your second mother, right, as a teen. And so she wrote a song called One Moment More, and which I love so much. It's a very powerful song. And anybody can really understand these lyrics when you remember someone that you've lost in your life that you've loved, a mother or partner or child or friend. She says, hold me even though I know you're leaving, and show me all the reasons you would stay. It's just enough to feel your breath on mine, to warm my soul and ease my mind. You've got to hold me and show me now. Give me just one part of you to cling to and keep me everywhere you are. It's just enough to still my heart and run and fade out with the falling sun. Please don't go. Let me have you just one moment more. Oh, all I need is just one moment more. You've got to just hold me and keep me and tell me that someday you'll be returning.
Wow. I mean, that's what you just shared with me right now, and sorry, with all of us, was that there's, I mean, you can hear the Cancer archetype so clearly in this person's words, because not only is it also speaking to Cancer as an archetype of the past or recurring, but it's a remembrance as well. And it's a remembrance to a moment of being held in a place of safety. And I think that moon on the North Node in Capricorn, and talking about the idea of resilience, is very, very, very clear in that sharing. It was like a kind of enclosing, or wanting to be exactly that, like wrapped around and held safe in the deepest, Uranus in the 8th, Pluto in the 8th states of vulnerability. At least that's my sort of takeaway from that, and how I can see, in a sense, the symbolism of the chart very, very apparent in this person's storyline.
So, so much loss. I mean, so much loss.
Right.
And she has a South Node in Cancer, Mars and Venus in Cancer. They are balsamic.
Yeah.
So and think about the pressure of her needing to really learn these lessons of being self-reliant, and being able to take care of herself and her heart in every way. Even her South Node of Lilith, which we can't see here, which is how she expressed the feminine and how she experienced being a woman in lives coming into this, is in Cancer as well. And so, there's this full court press, and the moon is on the North Node, right? In
Right.
Capricorn. It's like, oh my God, this is a hard chart. This is a really big life for her to evolve. And thank God for music. Thank God for the music. Saved her, soul saving. Is her music. And the nodes are even stationary, which makes this life prominent, like an exclamation point, a real benchmark in her evolution.
So look at that, right? You've got the South Node ruler, so the South Node ruler being the moon, conjunct the North Node. So there's something about the past that's trying to be resolved through the choices of the future. And then in a very interesting way, you've got Chiron at 60 degrees Aries squaring the nodal axis within a 10-degree orb there. But there's definitely something of the soul carrying of a wounding around their self, their their reliance, their self-reliance, their essential needs. And you can take it even one step further, and you can look at how Mercury, sorry, not Mercury, but the ruler of the North Node, being Saturn, and that connected to the Sun. And then here you have the South Node ruler, which is the Moon, on top of the North Node, conditioned by Saturn, and you have Mars and Venus in the fifth house. So Saturn conjunct the Sun, and then all of the planets on the North Node also being influenced by a fifth house complex. And you're right, it's definitely about a kind of resolving of some form of emotional self-image that is attached to the family tradition and the ancestral lineage, in my opinion. And it represents a kind of duality, Gemini, between the structures of a pre-existing family of origin and a new sort of relatability or connection to a new structure, to a new order, to a new form, to a new set of values and principles. And I think that with Pluto in the eighth house is a transfer, or at least Pluto in the Virgo dynamic over here at 29 degrees, it points to a suggestion that, yeah, there will be changes in this person's life that will come through a lot of surrender, ultimately.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's being forced through the chute, this life. Really. And you can see here the power that the words have and her lyrics have, how
Yes.
intimately connected her lyrics are to her emotional body and what she's experiencing. And then Neptune on the second is, that when you think about music, I do think of course, that Taurus second house energy and being a healing component for her. All right, yeah, that's a lot of Cancer energy.
So this is another chart that I have where you can see here this fourth house Saturn in Aries, and it squares the moon in the eighth in Cancer. And even if Neptune's in the 12th there, I was just looking at the trine, but the water energy that you were referring to in your earlier sharings of, where you've got the water trinity and this water's trying to move through and trying to really like flood through this person. And it's, again, when I look at this person's story, there is a history within the person's story that speaks to almost like a recreation of self that is being birthed from the old paradigm or the old tradition. Okay, so there's kind of a need for transformation of the self identity that was linked with a more social expectation of what was the way to be, self image, or the gender roles in that way, and to kind of, in a sense, reform that. And the struggle that comes along with reforming the roles that are played within a family structure or within uh, their personal sense of identity, and how they're trying to actually find an individuation within their own sense of identity. And if you see here, Saturn is ruled by Mars, as in the depositor, and that's also in the eighth house. And it even though it's in Leo, it's in the same house as the moon, and it kind of points to, in my view, again, as a consistent transformational process of their self-image. And Saturn in Aries points to a kind of like a new direction, and a need in this lifetime for a new direction, and that one will actually like experience the anxiety of separation from the womb. Fourth
Yeah.
house and Aries are naturally squaring each other in the natural zodiac, just as the Aries archetype here and the moon is squaring each other. You can see a repeating theme very clearly, suggesting kind of separation anxiety around pre-existing structures, and trying to find, this person is actually trying to find their new self in this way. And it seems like it's a very challenging experience, because sometimes when there's a new a vista, and when I say new vista, I'm actually speaking to the kind of soul, all of the stuff in the ninth house over here, you know, Sagittarius rising, wanting to go beyond what is in the most immediacy of my environment, to go and search. This person is intimately connected with nature. They actually, part of their work is in supporting the foundation of, this is an actual process that they do. Think Saturn in the fourth house and in Aries over here. They're supporting the reconstruction of how we build our homes that are from the earth. So it's taking earth knowledge and the way that earth's materials are, you know, formed, and then seeing how those earth materials can be used to build houses that are in alignment with natural law.
I love that.
Yeah, it's this, the soul is very connected to that Sag archetype in a very profound way. And a lot of that Saturn in the fourth speaks to because obviously Uranus has been transiting through Aries for the last 7 years. So a huge part of this activation of not only their North Node and Chiron, but also eventually their Saturn, it's already past their Saturn, has been about a reorientation to beliefs and ideologies that actually supports a deeper intention that the soul carries. And that intention is on one level to kind of align with natural law, and to be like bringing these deeper feminine truths to the world, and
Is
how
this
they
a
can
man
be
or is this a
sustainable.
guy or a girl, a male or female?
This is a female.
Gosh, I just love this chart because you can see too that she's got the ruler of her south node in Libra is Venus in the 10th, squaring that in Cancer in the 8th, which also squares her Mercury with ruler all the Sag planets. So all this energy around, of course, the North Node in Aries, Saturn in Aries retrograde in the 4th, but all this energy, cardinal energy around restoring balance. And
Yes.
in her case, you know, using natural materials, or you know, the moon in Cancer, so much about her work with housing and doing things that are in compliant with nature. And what a wonderful chart. And I love that Mars trines that Saturn to give her what she needs to empower herself, and hopefully to be able to connect with people who have the resources and the deep pockets to help her make it happen.
That's exactly what happens, actually. That's exactly
Yeah,
what happens in her life. She actually aligns with people that have got the resources, that are prepared to invest in these types of things, and
awesome.
it's only the beginning.
It's so important, I've shared before, and I think I was just talking with Deva about this on our recent planetary phases show, that you know, you can see planets in real stress in places like Saturn in the 4th retrograde in Aries squaring a moon in Cancer. That is not an easy, and squaring that moon in Cancer, squaring Mercury as well, which rules so many things in her chart, is not easy. That is out here on your own all day.
Yeah.
And yet you see that Saturn also trining her Mars, so determined to also not so much leaning on others, but it's like, hey, people, share the wealth. It's going to help everybody else around us. You know, this is not just about us. And so while she might be on her own emotionally, she is able to access that trine to motivate herself, to stay determined, to be creative in that process, and to be able to, again, empower herself emotionally and otherwise through the work she's doing in the world that ultimately does help others, which is a very important piece of this puzzle, being with a South Node in Libra, of course, and Venus and Mercury in the 10th in Libra. So doing something that's benefiting nature and benefiting others as well. So,
Right.
and look at that, moon is trining Neptune. It's like she's getting help from the gods, you know, in the process. It's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it when people end up doing exactly what they were built to do. And, you know, for her, working in nature with natural materials, that is spiritual work. That is karma yoga. That is, you know, making this world better than the way that we found it. And so bravo.
Yeah.
Bravo to her. Thank you for this chart. That was excellent.
Yeah. One thing that I just wanted to share, just to highlight what you were talking about. I don't know if you were, I'm sure you must have seen the burning down of the Notre Dame,
Oh, yes.
or the church, etc. And
Tragic.
this soul reposted a picture where it had 4 different aspects of Mother Nature, like different paces of nature, and it said, rebuild this, rebuild this, rebuild this, rebuild this. And so it wasn't speaking about the restoration of this church in that way. It was speaking about the parts of our home that have been sort of, abandoned, Moon Cancer archetype, or we've lost touch with that intimate connection. And it was kind of pointing to, why are we focusing on that when we could, there's so many of these other things that are every day. And they're just kind of pointing to the distortion that was something else.
Well,
Very
yeah, that's a lot
confrontational.
of religion, a lot of religious distortions in that cathedral. So
Yes.
it is really a symbol for Pluto, Saturn in Capricorn on the South Node in Capricorn.
Yeah.
Well, changing of the guards in terms of where we all need to be headed. All right. Well, gosh, incredible show, Simon. I always love gathering with you and sharing EA with others. It's an honor and a pleasure. And if you're interested in learning more about evolutionary astrology and becoming a more serious student, we do have a correspondence course available on the school's website, schoolofevolutionaryastrology.com. You can connect with myself or Simon if you have any questions. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you again for joining me today, Simon. It was a joy. And we'll be back next month looking at Saturn in Leo, or Saturn in the 5th house, and continue on our journey. Until next time, namaste.